Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Eardley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. We've made it to episode number 100 of the Resilient Retail Game Plan. Hi everybody, I'm Catherine Eardley. I am your host and I'm also a consultant for product businesses, a small business retail expert, and the founder of the Resilient Retail Club, my membership group for product businesses. Find out more at resilientretailclub.com. In the meantime though, 100 episodes. It's also almost exactly 2 years since I launched the podcast, and I have been producing almost one episode a week for the last 2 years. We have also had over 53,000 downloads at the time of recording, which is incredible. It sometimes boggles my mind how many people have downloaded this podcast. And it has honestly been such a fantastic experience and such a great experience for my business as well. And I just want to say a huge thank you to you, because without you, the listener, there would be no podcast. So thank you so much for coming along with me. Anyway, today's episode, what I wanted to do was look at the top 5 interview episodes that I'd had. I'd asked on social media a couple of times about what I should do for the 100th episode. And one of the themes that came up was people was talking about a recap or an overview. And I thought, how nice would it be to look at or look back at the top 5 interviews that I've had on the podcast, the most listened to episodes. Funnily enough, it sounds like I'm bragging here, all of the most listened to episodes, if you look at the podcast as a whole, most of those are my solo episodes, and a lot of them are the ones that I did at the beginning. So which is very gratifying, because it means a lot of people, when they found the podcast, have gone back to the beginning and listened to some of the older episodes. What I wanted to focus on today, what I thought would be really fun to look back on, was some of the interviews that we've had. So I've picked 5 episodes, the 5 top interview episodes. I've picked a snippet from each one, and we're going to cover some really great topics, from PR to SEO to TikTok, and finishing up with one of my favorite topics, slow marketing. So let's kick off. The first episode that we're going to look back on is episode number 55. It's with Lucy Werner, who wrote the book Hype Yourself. Lucy is a phenomenal small business champion, and we always have a good time when we talk. She's an absolute fount of knowledge. She's such a great cheerleader for other small businesses as well. I know that personally I found her advice invaluable as I've built my business. And also she gave me the recommendation for Khaleelah Jones, who is the person that I'm working with to publish my book, and whose company, Practical Inspiration Publishing, published Lucy's book, Hype Yourself, as well. So in this episode, or this snippet rather, we're going to be talking about, or Lucy's going to talk about, the concept of a personal brand and what that means for small businesses. Branding, as you say, it's like getting that kind of kernel at the heart of your business right, so that you can just say it over and over because you feel really confident. Whereas if you don't really know what you do and why, I think it's very hard to communicate that to people.
Totally. And when this comes through as well, through the kind of, this is where I guess that we're straddling the branding and publicity side. I've got my fingers interlocked here, just for the visual for you all at home. A lot of business owners could and should be using themselves as the founder of the business to help promote their product and services, because we all know that we connect with other humans, and that human interaction and that feeling personable is something that big business really struggles to achieve. So you'll notice, like big banking, big corporate, they've always got loads of photos of people, and they're trying to put people at the front of it. So as small business owners, it's ridiculous if we are founders and not putting ourselves forward in some way, because we have got something that big business would literally throw thousands at. So when you have a good brand strategy in place, it's then so much easier for you to think about your personal brand. And one of the analogies I give on the personal brand is thinking of yourself like a magazine. So you have like your news, which could be your business news, your features, it could be a wider trend. So if you're a product-based business, you might be looking at, okay, what are the trends in my space right now? Could it be a type of material we're using in sustainability, or is there something to do with veganism? Or actually, Pantone have just done their colour of the year, and Meghan Markle's also worn this shade, so everybody's talking about this particular colour.
Mm-hmm.
These are your sort of feature bits you could be bringing in. And then you have the sort of the fun AOB section, any other business section, where it's the bits of your personality coming through. And I'm telling you, when you know what your business is about and who it's for and what your purpose is, it's so much easier to pepper professional bits of your personality in that doesn't reveal your private life and everything that you don't want people to know about. It gives enough of your personality across to make somebody go, oh yeah, I listened to that podcast too. I read that book. Yeah, that Netflix show's cool. Oh, you're growing tomatoes. Oh, you like golf. Oh, you do gaming in your spare time. Like all of these things, they seem like nothing, but they're just little human touch points that really helps your audience to connect.
I was waiting for you to use your phrase that you used last time I heard you talk about this, which I loved.
We're showing a bit of ankle.
Showing a bit of ankle.
Showing a bit of ankle.
Oh
yeah.
my goodness. You don't know how many times people have said that too.
Ankle. I'm not, we're not sexist over here. Whatever you want to show. But yeah, I think there is this whole thing of like, we have to show everything. And you don't.
You're like, don't show your knickers, show your ankle.
I mean, I do actually have a client where we were talking about it the other day. And one of the questions was, what does a typical Friday night look like to you? And we both sort of chortled, and he said, yeah, problem is, I don't think I only know how to show ankle. I think I only know how to show a bit of thigh. And I was like, yeah, let's not answer that question. And that's fine. Sometimes the best response is no response. I just think, particularly when it comes to this confidence thing, people really struggle with personal brand and they think it's all about the personal bit. And it's like, no, it's literally just your face attached to the brand.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm very deliberately Lucy Werner PR. It's not who Lucy Werner is. Lucy Werner PR is like my work career alter ego.
I mean, some people do get very, very vulnerable and post photos of them crying, and
that's totally fine too.
That's totally fine. But then if you want to show like like me making bagels or something like that, then that's like, yeah. So you just kind of have those little touch points about whether or not people also like baking. And I have to say, yeah, that's always, whenever I post something about I'm watching on Netflix, it's always my most engaged on my stories. That's when people will chat back with me, or I'll say, what are your book suggestions? Or
they're crowd pleasers. They're little crowd pleasers.
Yeah. But that all kind of, as you said, that all boils down to knowing your brand. So for example, if you are somebody who creates art prints, then it would make a lot of sense if your ankle showing was about your house, or not even if you don't want to show your house, because I know obviously there's a lot about privacy, but your love of interiors, for example.
Yeah. And it's also like, if you're saying what it is you're about, so if you're really about sort of independent home interiors and supporting local, and then the next thing is you're doing a story in a big luxury chain and waxing lyrical about that, it can then go against what you're doing. So actually, but for a lot of small business owners, we are living and breathing our brand values.
Yes.
So it's not a problem. But if you don't know what your brand values are, then you could get yourself into a little bit of a pickle if you're sort of inadvertently waxing lyrical about Amazon, for example. If you've previously, what you've just bought from Amazon, if you've previously done a post digging Amazon out, being mean to small businesses, for example, Yeah. This is nothing against Amazon. Amazon, please don't come and see me. I've got no money.
Okay, the second most listened to interview episode is actually an anonymous person. What does that mean? Well, the smallbizmemez account on Instagram is one of my favorites, still one of my favorite Instagram accounts, still makes me laugh every day. And the founder is anonymous and nobody knows who actually started it. So for this podcast episode, I'd spoken to her through Instagram, and she had agreed to come and do the podcast recording, but we had to have the video off. As a result, I still don't know who it is, but we had a lot of fun. I think this episode gets the record for the one where I laughed the most during the recording. But in this clip, we are going to be hearing about why it's so important for small business owners to feel that they found people who really understand the pain that they're going through. What do you think it is about the kind of small business experience that means it is ripe for comedy, or so many people have found it so funny?
Probably just what we were already saying is just so people just deal with the same stuff every day. Like when you're running a small business, it's very monotonous. A lot of times you're working by yourself. So maybe you don't have the coworkers to, gossip with or whatever. So just finding an outlet of like-minded people who are all dealing with it. And a lot of the people are just so funny that it really works out. Like, some people they'll like submit stuff or they'll do original memes, and I read it and I just start laughing, and I'm like, these people are just so funny. Like,
I suppose it's so true. It's like almost like the kind of water cooler chat, right?
Yeah.
There is definitely, for sure, I think about every time I've worked for a business when I've been in the kind of corporate world, and there's always been someone that I needed. It's almost like you will need one friend in every job where you literally can just kind of be like, did you know what Sandra said today? Like, oh my God, and I feel like this account is almost like small businesses' opportunity to do that, like a customer.
Yes, that's exactly how I feel, because I think that's why it's worked out so well, because it's like a lot of people, they might have a friend or two that sell stuff, but a lot of the people are like, I have no other people that sell the same thing as me. And then I see people like making friendships in the comment section. And I'm like, yes, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that feeling, that pain of when someone says like, oh, how come you charge so much for that? It's like, I could think that. Well, somebody was doing that with their balloon the other day. There was a meme a video of them. Somebody said, oh, I could just do it with a Sharpie. And then they're like, okay, here you go. And it just looked terrible. Or just sending them all the pieces of the item in a box and just saying like, okay, all right, you make it then.
Yeah, they're so funny. Like the one you were talking about, the balloon, that was Fun Club. And she's absolutely hilarious. But that video was just so true, because people are like, I could just do that, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, no, you actually need. And then people will just list, 20 different things you'll have to buy to make that one single thing. People just don't appreciate the amount of work that some of these people are putting into their stuff.
Oh, yeah. And also just the skill. I mean, I'm terrible at craft. Like, I bought myself, during lockdown, probably like everyone else, I bought myself a craft box subscription because I was like, come on, Catherine, you can do this. I can bake cakes, like that's the extent of it. And then I was like, I'm going to make things. And I had to cancel it after the third one that I just messed up like so badly. It was like a macrame bag. And I was like, this is not happening. Like, I can't, turns out I can't tie knots. Like, so I'm always in awe whenever I work with my clients. I'm always like, wow, it's amazing what you can do. But I know that there are those people out there that just they're just like, I could do that. And you're like, oh, go on then. Like,
yes, let's see it. Let's see that masterpiece, please.
I mean, it only took me 200 hours to learn how to do this. But
some of the people that other people are saying they could do that, I look at it and I'm like, okay, like good luck in like 5 years, maybe.
Our next most listened to episode is on a completely different topic, and that is on the topic of SEO. I am joined in this particular episode by digital marketing expert Khaleelah Jones, and she talks in this particular clip about the digital marketing ecosystem. And I have to say that this explanation of how social media and SEO interacts for small businesses is one of the most illuminating descriptions that I've heard on what can be sometimes a rather tricky topic. So I hope you'll enjoy what she has to say about how these various different elements of digital marketing work together for your business. Why is it important? Why should people be spending time on their search engine optimization as opposed to, for example, social media marketing? Or I mean, I know it's not an either or, but like, why is it important?
That's such a good question. So I always describe digital marketing as an ecosystem. And just like any healthy ecosystem, one thing really does depend on another. And if we take as an example, just social media and SEO, if we look at the way that people use social media, which is often, particularly for retailers, as a validation metric, is your business legitimate? Are people actually buying from your business? And, maybe some information about where things are made or what exactly it is that you offer. Then the next step, oftentimes, it depends on the demographics that you're targeting, but oftentimes will be, well, let me go find them online. And interestingly enough, it might come as a shock, but a lot of people are not just clicking on maybe a product directly from social media marketing. A lot of times they'll go and actually Google you. And so that is very important. But if we also think about just cutting that out for whatever reason, people are not using social media. This is particularly important if your target demographic skews a little bit older or even a little bit younger, because obviously with TikTok, people might find out about your brand, but then they need a way to get to your website, right? To make purchase.
Yeah.
You really need to be able to be visible. And then if we look at it from the other side, where I work with a lot of clients who are like, well, I'll just skip SEO completely and do paid advertising. But with paid advertising, you're paying for people to come to your site or to buy something. Wouldn't it be great to invest the time and over time not have to pay? And that's really the trade-off that you have there. So if you think of this as like a healthy ecosystem, SEO is really kind of the linchpin that draws everything in together, because it also is helpful in terms of how people actually are engaging on your site. So that's also very important as well. A big thing that I think that people think about is SEO is just keywords, but it also is people's activity and experience on your website. So if you don't have a great website experience, then that can be very, very problematic, right? And not just for people bouncing off your page or not being able to find what they need, but also for SEO. So really trying to think of it as this part of an ecosystem, not just using one particular tactic, but using all of them as kind of things that are in your back pocket is super, super important.
There's so much here. There's so many different pieces here, but I love this idea of the ecosystem and the fact that that explains a lot, because one thing that has always slightly baffled me is when I look at, for example, my Google search console, then the most searched term that leads to my website is Resilient Retail Club, which makes a lot of sense now you say it, because it's like people see you on social media and then the first thing they do, and that's true. I suppose that there's a lot of the time when I see a business I'm interested in, I will Google them. I won't necessarily go from social media directly. I'll just kind of want to have a look around. And so it's bearing that in mind. And then, the fact that they all work together. So you've got to be discoverable in other ways. And to your point as well about paying for people to come. So paying for that traffic, especially a lot of what I talk about with club members is about profitability. Then obviously paid traffic is part of your strategy. If it's the main part of your strategy, then that does start getting trickier, especially if ads costs fluctuate and things like that. Whereas SEO, it's free. It's free traffic. And the other thing the stat that always sticks in my head as well is that 50% of all online purchases start with a Google search. So it's also that intent is so different, isn't it? When people are searching on Google for something, it's because they're looking for it. Whereas on social media, they maybe very much have different agenda to be on social media than them shopping. Whereas when they're Googling, long sleeved black dress, like that's what they're looking for.
I always think about things not only as an ecosystem, but coming back to the funnel, right? And so social media is very top of funnel, right? You might be either just bored, like scrolling, or you might be looking for inspiration or like you're at the very top of the funnel though, right? But if someone is Googling a very high intent keyword, that means that they're already like much further down in the funnel. They're considering a purchase or even like have the intent to purchase. So I think that that's always something to keep in mind. Although you can obviously write blog posts and things too, that then if you optimize them can get people at a higher level of the funnel as well. So I'm sure that lots of retailers use interest-based keywords. So for example, if you're selling like toothbrushes, like the 10 best toothbrush types for sensitive gums or something like that, that obviously is getting somebody at the very top of the funnel. But the other great thing about that is that you can reuse that content for things like social media, and it's elevating you on your search engine rankings. So again, all these things come together and fit so nicely.
Coming in at number 4 for the most listened to interview episode is an episode all about TikTok. And I'm joined for this episode by Karis Varley, who I've known since 2012 when she worked for me at the age of 20 as an assistant, or an apprentice actually, in a company that we were with for about 6 months. In this episode, she describes her journey towards how a single product generated, I think, roughly in the region of £28,000 for her when she, actually, one of her assistants, came up with the idea for a product to sell via TikTok. Do you want to just start us off telling us a little bit how you got started on TikTok?
Yeah, well, funny enough, I felt too old for TikTok too. I had a lovely girl working with me in 2020. She had been working with me previously. Obviously, lockdown happened. So we took a little break and she came back in my office in the August.
Yeah.
When we were kind of getting released a bit from lockdown. And she just so passionately said to me, I have this idea, you should be on TikTok. And she started to describe this product to me. Now, me especially working with you in places like Green Baby, where we always say if we could have taken the reins and created some of our products, I just felt like, okay, I'm gonna listen to her.
Yeah.
If she's really confident in her market, I don't want to be that boss that always puts off my staff. If I can help them introduce a product, then I will.
Yeah.
So I thought, let's go for it, but let's do it my way. So we took her passion for the product,
yeah,
and her sort of understanding of TikTok, and then we took my strong branding background and said, right, okay, if we're going to create, we're going to do it like this. And then, okay, well, if it's Sparkle Storm, it has to be personalized.
Yeah.
We probably spent about 4 hours creating this video. We posted it up and it sort of had a few views, and then it started gaining pace and it had a couple of thousand views. And I thought, well, this is great. I haven't really had any orders yet.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing her the next day and she was buzzing. And I said, okay, well, this is great. Yeah, it is great. I don't want to be a killjoy, but it has to create orders. If it's really going to take off, if it's a real big win, yes, visibility is great, but we also want orders. And sure enough, a few days later, we would hit 10K, then 20K. So yeah, that's how it kicked off. It was a lot of trust in someone that was younger than me, and it just paid off. I just applied what she felt passionate about to my business.
That's really fascinating. So it was an idea. It wasn't even just like, oh, you should be on TikTok. But she said, you should be on TikTok with a particular type of product. So was that because she'd seen other people doing similar types of products and thought, well, Karis could do that?
Her exact words, fair play to her, were, you could make it better.
Right.
And I thought, oh, yeah, that's why you work in my office. Yes, we can make it better. And I think as well, we were in a really strange era of lockdown where TikTok was picking up.
Yeah.
We're seeing lots of different types of businesses, but they weren't necessarily well-established businesses.
Yeah.
She was seeing smaller, maybe newer businesses that didn't quite have the equipment I had. And she knew the equipment I had and she knew what I could do.
Yeah.
She just was so confident that we could make it better. She didn't even say personalized. She just said, I've got this product. You need to be selling it. It would sell. It would sell. Trust me. Trust me.
Okay, so then I've got to ask you the question. What is the product?
It was personalized album covers. So
okay.
At the time, it was just album covers. So an A4 frame
that
has a photo at the top, and then the bottom half looks almost like if you were on Spotify or iTunes on your phone, you'd have the play button, the pause button, you have a little song bar and the times on it of the song.
Yeah.
But where I applied Sparkle Storm is I said, okay, if we're going to do it, which elements can they personalize? So instead of putting the song name, I'm going to let them put maybe their names.
Yeah.
And instead of having any time, they could put the time almost as if it's like the date of their wedding or the date of their anniversary.
Yeah.
So there were little elements that we did that then made it sparkle storm. And I think as well, because I already had an established business and website, I gave people that link to then go and buy it, which sometimes when you watch TikTok videos, you think, that's great, but how do I buy it?
So the final clip today comes from episode number 72 with Charlotte Pierce of InkPact. InkPact is a company that sends handwritten letters at scale. So if a big retailer, for example, wants to send a handwritten note to their best customers, InkPact can step in and they can have a team of handwriters put together these letters and send them out to customers. In this episode, Charlotte talks about her theory of slow marketing, which is really all about taking an analog approach in a digital world. What I love about InkPact is this, it sort of plays into this idea that we go one direction. So everything's becoming automated, everything's becoming online. So that's really important. And as soon as you start pushing things in one direction, then actually doing something analog, if you like, becomes really, really powerful, because now it's suddenly very different to what everyone else is doing. So effectively, these businesses, as you said, it's powered by tech, it's triggered by a certain point in the customer journey, but then it's taking it back offline onto pen and paper, and that's the real power of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you've got to make it easy. So the tech is where it makes it easy, but actually because it's analog is why it works, like because it's analog is why it gets noticed and why people care and share it with each other. I remember when we first started, people were like, I feel like an influencer for receiving that, and couldn't believe that companies that was the bigger actually, could send something like this. It had that kind of shock factor as well. But I love it. I mean, you've seen things like, knitting has come back because people want to use their hands again and create things, and pottery. And I love anything that's tactile. And I think as human beings, it doesn't matter how digital the world gets. We want to feel things, and we want to physically feel them emotionally and physically. And I don't think that's ever going to change as long as we're human. So the more we can kind of link that into business, I think is great. And I talk about this concept called slow marketing. People are like, Charlotte, slow marketing, everyone wants fast and big. And I'm like, no, actually, that's not actually what makes you go faster. So I quite often do talks, and I talk about slow marketing is the fast way to grow. So by doing it slower and more thoughtful, actually, you grow quicker. So yeah, it's an interesting kind of concept, but I personally just think that is the way forwards. And if we get to a point where everyone's doing slow marketing, maybe it'll go back to fast, but I think we've got a long way to get there first.
So how would you define slow marketing?
So I guess it's the antithesis of fast digital click. I can just reach a million people in 2 clicks with one kind of content. It's kind of the opposite. So it's really thoughtful. It has that end user in mind, it's that one-to-one connection. It's super personalized. It takes a while to create it and to come up with the campaign or to come up with the idea. And it might be completely different from one person to another. So one of our clients is Sweaty Betty, and they have this most amazing loyalty group. Like their top fans absolutely rave about them. But everything they do is kind of slow and thoughtful for different groups of people. So they've even done things that aren't very scalable. Like they have yoga sessions in stores, but because it's so thoughtful and for their local communities, actually that helps them grow. So it's almost like doing things that aren't scalable is helping them scale. So it's kind of that it takes time to create those communities, and it takes time to create loyalty. And for someone to think they can do some really kind of fast, quick marketing to get that loyalty, I think is starting to become very outdated and not working. And it costs quite a lot. It's going up and up in cost anyway. So.
Yeah, that's so true. And it reminds me, I did an interview with Holly Tucker for a Forbes article a couple of weeks ago, and she talked about how she tells small businesses in particular to think about making friends rather than attracting passers-by. So passers-by being, you can do an Instagram ad and people will see it and they may scroll on by, or maybe some of them will purchase. But what you're talking about sounds like it's like that making friends, which is really powerful. And it's also, what springs to mind with that is that it's very hard to replicate. So it's quite good if you want to almost not competition proof yourself, because I don't know if anyone can quite competition proof themselves, but if you've spent that time growing an organic relationship with people, do you think that's harder to replicate if a new person comes into your market?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is literally like real life friendships and relationships in a way. I love Holly. I once did a talk with The Guardian and she was there and I was like in awe listening to her speak, because she has that, you know, she does create these really great relationships with people in her business and then she helps other people do the same. But I once did a talk at like this digital marketing conference and it was all around like effectively like quite big scale. It was called hypergrowth. So it's very kind of in that vast world. And I did a talk called What's Love Got to Do with It? And I think people thought I was initially very crazy. And I told stories of how I'm now with my fiance and how it started and what was thoughtful, and it was quite gamified. And on our first date, he did this treasure hunt around London. And you know, I remember it, and it led us to an Eros statue. And I was talking about creating Eros moments with your customers, because it kind of is like dating. It is like friendships. I mean, there are so many parallels you can bring in. And the more companies are doing that, the deeper your customer relationships are, the more likely they are to stay with you. It's expensive to get a customer. Yeah. So why would you want to keep having to go and get loads and loads of more and lose the ones you've got? It makes so much more sense to work on those relationships. But I love that, the friendship one. I always talk about it in terms of like dating and relationships, but friendships are exactly the same. You know, they're quite slow sometimes to build and get really deep. Sometimes they can be quite complicated, but they're really worth the effort when you put them in.
So there you have it. Those were the top 5 episodes of the Resilient Retail Game Plan, the top 5 interview episodes, I should say, over the last 2 years. I hope that you enjoyed them. I certainly enjoyed revisiting them, I'll be honest, to pick out the clips for you today. I hope that you took something away from each one. And if you've not listened to the full episodes, then I do suggest that you go back and take a listen, because all of them are really full of some great tips and learnings about building your small business. And there we have it, episode 100. I just want to say again, a huge thank you to you for listening, for tuning in each week. And I really can't stress how much I appreciate it. I appreciate every single person who's ever messaged me on Instagram or sent me a picture of where they're listening, or if they're walking their dog, or what they're up to, or if they're in their studio while they're listening to the podcast. I record these podcasts in my small little home office. And so it's always such a pleasure to know that they are getting out there and that people are finding them useful and helpful. And I can't stress enough how much I enjoy hearing your messages and hearing about how much you enjoy the podcast. I also should say a huge, great big thank you to James King, who is my podcast editor, who has edited the podcast right from the get-go. In fact, what happened was when I thought about starting a podcast, I actually did a course on how to run a podcast, how to start a podcast, how to edit it. And what I took away from that course was that there was no way that I had the time or the skill to learn how to do this myself. And so I turned to James, who has been an absolutely phenomenal editor ever since then. He's edited all 100 of the episodes. He does all of the show notes as well. And then Jo, my assistant, she actually is the person who puts them up on the website, puts them out onto social media as well. So the podcast, really, I'm so fortunate that my main job with the podcast is organising the guests, speaking to them, recording them, but then everything else really between them, Jo and James, take care of it. And I just want to say a huge thank you to them for 100 episodes. And stay tuned. We're going to be back with more and more of your stories of small business owners, more tips and practical advice as always to help you keep growing your product business. So why not drop me a note on Instagram? Let me know what you thought about episode number 100. Let me know what your favourite episode has been so far. And I look forward to seeing you next week. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.